In this village, everyone thought they knew who she was. They were wrong.
She did not cry. That's the first thing you need to know about this story. A grown woman struck a girl across the face in the middle of a crowded market market.
Feats, not a slap for show, a real blow, the kind that leaves a print fatus, and the girl didn't fall, didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. She just stood there, blood at her lip, eyes locked on the woman who hit her, calm as still water. And 30 feet away, hidden in the shadow of a merchant's awning, a man who had been secretly watching her for 11 days finally stepped into the light. A wife neither of them had ever met. A wife bound to him by a promise made in a thunderstorm, 40 years before either of them was born. He was not a merchant. He was a prince, and the girl bleeding in front of him was his wife. Nobody in that market had any idea what they were watching. Stay with me, Fork. I'm going to tell you everything, from the very beginning.
And if a story like this is the kind that stays with you, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now let's begin.
If you'd asked anyone in the village of Enuku what they thought of Adana, you'd have gotten a shrug and 3 words: blacksmith's daughter, quiet. That was the whole file they kept on her. Parents gone, sells herbs on Wednesdays, keeps to herself. It was true, and it was also almost nothing about who she actually was. Adana was 20 years old, with skin like dark earth after rain and hands rough from work no one thanked her for. She wrapped her hair in old orange cloth because pretty things cost money she didn't have. She was, by every measure the village had agreed on without asking her opinion, unremarkable. They were wrong. They just weren't paying attention. Her mother had died of river fever when Adana was 4, taking an unborn brother with her. Her father, Amika, raised her alone. He was the village blacksmith, and he was brilliant with a hammer. But before the forge, before the quiet village life, he had spent 6 years training under a court scholar. He'd read law, history, botany, the old genealogies. And then, for reasons he never fully explained, he walked away from all of it and chose to build things with his hands instead. But the mind never left him. He kept 2 cedar chests full of books, and he taught his daughter everything in them. Adana could read before she was 5. She could name any plant in 3 languages before he'd let her sell so much as a single bundle at market. He died 3 years ago, a wasting illness the dry season brought, and never took back. Adana was 17, suddenly alone, and she did what she always did. She managed. She grew things, dried things, sold things, fixed things for neighbors in exchange for small kindnesses. She stayed below the waterline of anyone's attention because she'd learned something early. Being invisible was its own kind of armor. But there was one thing about Adana the village never knew. Around her neck, hidden beneath her wrapper, she wore a plain iron ring on a thin cord. No jewel, no decoration. Just one small mark pressed into the band, like a seal. Her father had pressed it into her palm on the last night of his life, his voice already down to breath. "That is a promise made before you were born," he told her. A living oath sealed the old way, between 2 men who had nothing to offer each other but their honor. When the time comes, the other half of this promise will find you. Do not be afraid of it. Do not run. She was 17. She didn't understand it. She wore the ring every day anyway, and told no one, because the village didn't need another reason to talk about her. They already had one. Her name was Chiaka. Chiaka was the only daughter of the local chief, beautiful in the way that stops conversations, dressed by servants whose entire job was her hair, and cruel in the specific way people are when cruelty has never once cost them anything. For 9 months, Adana had been her favorite target. Little comments, timed laughter from her attendants. the kind of cruelty that could always be called just a joke if anyone pushed back, so nobody ever did. And Adana, true to form, said nothing, picked up what got knocked over, went home. But this particular Wednesday, Chiaka arrived at the market with something sharper than usual and an audience to perform it for. It had actually been a good morning. A traveling medicine trader had bought every bundle of fever root Adana had without haggling and told her, flatly, that her preparation was the finest he'd seen outside the palace. Adana had smiled, a real one, rare enough that she noticed it happening. Then she felt the temperature drop. Chiaka had arrived. The usual routine started. The mock surprise at the empty stall. Charity must have come by. The trained laughter. Adana kept packing her baskets and said nothing. Almost done. Almost free. Then Chiaka leaned in close, and her voice dropped to something meant for Adana alone. She said her mother's name. She described exactly how she died. She mentioned the baby that died with her. And she laughed while she said it. Something in Adana that had been carefully, deliberately built over 3 years cracked clean down the middle. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she lifted her eyes. Not the careful downward glance she used to navigate the world, but a full, level, unhurried look. The look of someone who has just decided this world doesn't get to look away from her anymore. And Chiaka, who had spent 9 months certain the girl in front of her was too small to ever look back, felt something twist in her chest that she would spend weeks refusing to name. Fear. She covered it the only way she knew how. Her hand rose. It came down. The sound cracked across the market like a dropped clay pot. Adana didn't move, didn't fall, didn't cry. Blood gathered at her lip. 4 fingers bloomed red across her cheek, and her eyes, dark, level, completely unbroken, stayed exactly where they'd been, fixed on Chiaka. And at the far edge of the market, in the shadow he'd been standing in for 11 days, a man in a plain traveling cloak took 1 step forward, then stopped himself. Not yet. His name was Obina, second son of the Obi, the ruler of the Enuku kingdom, a realm currently splitting quietly at the seams over a succession crisis, 2 years unresolved. 3 sons, 1 throne, no clean answer. Obina was 24, and the court had never taken him seriously. His older brother was louder, broader, better at every performance power requires. Obina was the quiet one, the one who read too much and asked the questions in council that nobody wanted answered. The court had long ago decided he wasn't a threat. The court was about to be wrong. 6 weeks earlier, his father's chief archivist had opened a sealed cedar chest that hadn't been touched in 30 years. Inside was a marriage contract sealed the old way, iron ring pressed into black wax, blood signatures witnessed by names too respected to challenge. It was 40 years old. It had been written between the current Obi-Wi, then a young prince, alone and off the road, and a blacksmith from Enuku village who had found him half dead at the bottom of a flooded embankment in the middle of the night, broken arm, dying horse, rising water. The blacksmith carried him to high ground on his back, set the bone with cloth and sticks, kept a fire going till help came. The prince had nothing to repay that with. No coin could touch it. So 2 men sat by a fire on a wrecked road and did the only thing left. They made a promise. A living oath, sealed in blood. The blacksmith's firstborn daughter would one day marry the prince's second son. When Obina first read it, he was furious. He wasn't a clause in someone else's contract. He demanded it be dissolved. His father just looked at him, tired and steady, and said, "This was a promise made between 2 men who had nothing left but their word. Break it, and you don't just break a clause. You break the last thing in this kingdom nobody's yet sold for convenience. Read it again before you decide." So Obina rode to Enuku, telling himself he was only there to assess the situation, find the girl, offer generous compensation, quietly end the contract, go home. That was 11 days ago. He'd found her the first morning at the market, and he never left. He watched her slip extra herbs to old women who came up short, then turn away before they could thank her. He watched her rattle off plant names in 3 languages that traveling physicians had to look up in books. He followed her once to a flat rock at the river bend, where she sat with her feet in the current, talking quietly to the water, not praying, just talking, the way you talk to something old that's always been on your side. He stood in the trees far longer than any assessment required. He knew exactly what that meant. And now, the market, the slap, the blood, the eyes that would not break. He stepped out of the shadow. Enough. One word. He didn't need to raise his voice. It moved through the crowd like a stone dropped into still water, ripples touching every face. He pushed back his hood. What happened to Chaka's face next, the vendors would describe for weeks. The color left it, not a blush, not gradually, all at once like a lamp going out. She'd been to the palace. She'd seen the portrait in the 3rd corridor. She knew that face. Her mouth opened. "Whatever you're about to say," Obina said, not unkindly but with no room in it for negotiation, "do not say it here." He crossed the parted crowd and stopped beside Adana, not in front of her, like she needed shielding, beside her, at her shoulder, the way you stand with someone when you've chosen a side. She looked at him, measuring, giving nothing away yet. "I do not know you," she said. "No," he agreed, "but I know you. And there's something between us that needs to be discussed, if you're willing to hear it." He reached into his cloak and held out a plain iron ring on a thin cord, one small mark pressed into the band, identical to the one against her skin. The air left Adana's chest, not shock. Something older. The feeling of a weight you've carried so long you'd forgotten it was heavy, suddenly connecting to the thing it was always meant to hold. "My father gave me this the night he died," she said, barely a whisper. "Mine gave me this," Obina said. "They made a promise on a dark road a long time ago. I spent 6 weeks deciding whether to honor it." He held the ring steady in his open palm. "I'm done deciding." The market had gone so silent you could hear the river 3 streets away. Chiaka stood in the middle of it all, the sound of her own choice still hanging in the air, and nobody was looking at her anymore. In a village this size, a secret survives about 12 hours. By morning, a rider was already racing for the capital. 3 days later, Prince Ifeanyi arrived. Obina's older brother, 16 soldiers behind him, a royal seal on a document, and the particular energy of a man who'd done the math and did not like the answer. Because if this contract held Obina, the brother everyone had comfortably underestimated for years suddenly had ground to stand on in a succession fight that had no clean winner. Ifeanyi arrived smiling. He was very good at that. In the chief's reception room, he turned all his charm on Adana. "Surely," he said warmly, "you're a practical woman, a contract scratched out in a storm 40 years ago, no formal court witness. This could never hold up to serious review." "Which court?" Adana asked. Ifeanyi blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "Which court are you referring to?" she said, perfectly level, perfectly pleasant. This was sealed under the right of living debt, not civil law, not trade law. The living debt right predates the Royal Council by well over a century, and it says, in language that has never once been amended because it cannot be, that no authority appointed by a reigning OBE, including the OB himself, may review, revise, or dissolve a sealed and witnessed living debt oath. Silence. The specific kind with texture to it. "The signatures are valid," she went on. The seals match. Your own archivist verified the blood marks himself. It's in his notation on the cover page. There is no court in this kingdom under which that document is anything other than exactly what it looks like. Binding. Ifeanyi studied her for a long moment. How do you know the law so precisely? My father was a blacksmith, Adana said. Before that, he was a court scholar. He kept 2 chests of books, and I had a great many quiet years with nothing else to do. From the window, Obina was watching her, and the thing that had been growing in him since that first morning at the river finally got too big to keep arguing with. He'd ridden here to end a contract. He was starting to understand he'd found something he had absolutely no interest in ending. That evening, he found her back on her rock at the river, feet in the current, the ring turning between her palms. I thought you'd come, she said without looking up. He sat beside her. The contract gives us a frame, he said. What we build inside it is ours alone. It can be nothing. It can be something neither of us has words for yet. I'd like the chance to find out, if you're willing. The water moved past them, unhurried. Don't make this something I have to survive, she said. I'm very tired of surviving things. I know, he said. So am I. It wasn't instant. Nothing true ever is. It's a slow accumulation of small right choices until the direction becomes unmistakable. But things moved. Ifeanyi's legal challenge went before the elder tribunal 11 days later. The presiding elder read the document once, set it down, and looked at Ifeanyi's counsel. This isn't a question, he said. This is a contract. Come back to me with a question. Dismissed in 14 minutes. Ifeanyi left the village 3 days after that, without a word to his brother. As for Chiaka, nothing official ever happened to her. No decree, no announcement. It was quieter than that, and far more permanent. The vendors who used to laugh at her jokes stopped laughing. The women who used to greet her first stopped bothering. The village discovered, in the aftermath of what it had watched, that its own silence had grown a weight it no longer wanted to carry. Some silences have an expiration date. When the full story reached the OB, he sat with it a long while, the archivist's report, the tribunal's ruling, and finally told his son, "Your grandfather would have known exactly what to make of her." Obina smiled at his father simply, for the first time in years, not strategically, just simply. And Adana never made herself small again. Not because a title had changed anything about her safety, and not because she'd ever needed rescuing the way the world assumed she had. She stopped shrinking because she finally understood what her father had really been telling her with his last breath. The ring was never about a contract at all. It was a message from a man who had watched his daughter think and grow and endure, and who wanted to make absolutely sure that before he left this world, the world would eventually be forced to agree with what he already knew. She wore both rings after that, one for her father, one for what came next. Being overlooked is not the same as being unworthy. It only means the wrong people were looking. Somewhere out there, someone is making themselves smaller right now, quieter, less visible, less demanding of the space they actually deserve, because the world around them never paid close enough attention. And after long enough, it's easy to start believing the world's assessment was right. It never was. Your worth was never something other people got to decide by failing to notice it. If this story stayed with you, tell me which moment hit hardest and where in the world you're watching from. I read every comment, and if you're new here, welcome home. We tell stories exactly like this one every week. Good night.